a lot of Albertans want out. That's very clear. But what happens if it doesn't happen? Welcome to the Political Orphans. My name is Nico Lagan. And today I'm joined by none other, journalist Jason Lavigne. What's going on, man? Thanks for, first off, thanks for having me on this morning. It's
It was
nice
a
to see
fun
you
time.
again.
Hmm.
Yeah. I was going to say that's what your wife said. Actually, it wasn't even, it wasn't even a joke. That's funny. But
No,
I last week I reached out to you because I saw a post from Table Salt, which funny enough, I just noticed just before the show as I was getting ready for this that it was taken down. Which interesting. I never take my posts down unless they're inaccurate, so maybe that's why it was taken down. But it was stipulating that 42% of Albertans would vote to separate if everyone considering a protest vote would follow through. 42%, that is a lot of Albertan. If that post is accurate, makes me believe that it might not be because it was taken down. But that's what made me reach out to you. So it's been a while since we talked Alberta independence. So for the non-Westerners out there, what's going on right now?
well, every single day that goes by, there seems to be more support for it. I'm not surprised to hear that 42 number because we've heard numbers even higher than that through internal polling, through other polling, and even some mainstream. Early in the year, even last year, around the election, it was around 30% was a pretty common number being used everywhere. And since that election, Nico, things have changed that actually support the idea of independence for Alberta. Mark Carney's following through with a lot of his promises and his book values. He's kind of dangling carrots and pulling them away from Daniel Smith, like the MOU. And we're seeing things like New World Order being mentioned multiple times. And as of today, it looks like there may be a majority Liberal government with some floor crossing support that have really caused a lot of support to go towards Alberta independence. So I'm going to be frank with you. I think 42% might have been a little bit low to what we're actually seeing out there. But I haven't seen it go down. I can tell you that for sure. Support for independence isn't heading in the other direction. We've had a year and a bit of hearing Canadians say how selfish we're being, how ignorant we're being, how rude we're being, how unpatriotic. In fact, traitor has been thrown around quite a few times. But what I'm not hearing from any Canadians at this stage is, hey, stay. We love you. We want to work with you. So over the last year and a half or so, support hasn't switched to losing support. So I'd be surprised if it actually isn't 42. It might be a little bit higher than that.
Which is, as someone that's not an Albertan, someone that's not in the West, that's very surprising to me because that is not the impression that we get if we listen to mainstream media. That's not the impression that we get from anyone unless we're directly taking our information from people that support the independence movement. Because everything else, even the conservatives are not talking about this. 42% of Albertans who are considering a protest vote, if they follow through, that would represent 42% of Albertans. It's insane. That is a death sentence to the Conservative Party of Canada. Without Alberta, they would never be elected ever again. And they're not talking about it. But what are you seeing on your side? Are you seeing some type of smear campaign?
Some type. We're seeing a pretty dramatic one, and it's getting stronger each week that goes by. We're seeing hit pieces. We're seeing misinformation. We're seeing misrepresentation. That's another one. For example, when Edmonton was doing a signing event, there were hour-long lineups around the corner in the park. The drone footage showed thousands of people, but the media said hundreds of people. So even misrepresentation on what's actually going on. Do you remember in 2016, 2017, when Trump was running for president, and you would see his audiences like stadiums full of people, and then you would see very little for Hillary Clinton, but yet the media was saying the polls say 98% chance that Hillary's going to win. That's kind of the same thing we're seeing here. We're seeing hundreds of events across Alberta. We're seeing hundreds of signing locations across Alberta and some places in the US, Mexico as well. We didn't see the same thing for the Forever Canadian groups. We didn't see hundreds of signing locations all over the place. So we're seeing like two different representations here on the ground. You drive around Alberta, almost every exit by a town, there will be a bunch of flags. And when you see a bunch of flags stuck to poles or in the ground, you know that that's a signing location. You can pull over and go ahead and sign. We didn't see that kind of support happening across Alberta during the summer months when the Forever Canada people are doing theirs. But during the winter months, we're seeing it here in Alberta. So I think that tells you a lot, if you're paying attention on the ground here, that there's a lot more support here than the mainstream media is covering. And I think the numbers are going to be quite surprising to people when they start to come out.
When do you expect to see actual numbers? Because if I'm following properly, there was a ruling that was made last Friday that could potentially be very problematic for the independence movement. So when are you, well, you know what? First off, explain to us what actually happened on Friday. And in your estimation, when do you expect to start seeing those numbers? Because people have been voting for months now.
Well, not voting, but collecting signatures for months, leading
Sure.
to a potential vote. Yeah.
Good point. Good point.
So what we had on Friday was a stay. I actually personally, I think it's actually good news because the application for the injunction wanted to be a lot more aggressive and just completely stop the entire process, which is not what the stay did. The stay didn't actually stop the process. The stay has allowed the process to continue. So the collection of the signatures, there will be no interruption on that at all. And that was part of the concern was will April 7th, or the decision came out on the 10th, will that actually stop the signature collection period? And it did not. So that's good news. The signature collection period will continue to May 2nd. And then the final documents should have been provided to Elections Alberta around May 7th or so. But what the injunction or the stay actually did do was stop Elections Alberta from proceeding any further after the signature collection period is done. So we may not get an official count as quickly as we were hoping for. The good news is there will be an unofficial count because right now there is an accounting firm involved. They are auditing the documents and signatures as we speak. And as more of them are coming in, they're being audited as well. They're doing some diligence and they're going through the exact same verification process that Elections Alberta is going to go through, checking for duplicates, making sure that these people are on the voter registration form, and going ahead and already doing a preemptive validation on the signature numbers. And this is being done regardless of what the court says. So there could be an unofficial tally provided early May. Or we could see that the court will lift their stay after the signature period is done with a decision. This is what I think is going to happen. This is my opinion, that the judge decided to take some time to go through all the arguments that were provided last week, go through the law that was pointed to last week, and take her time to provide a decision that's probably, in her mind, balanced and fair, which I think is going to lead to a explanation to the applicant, so the First Nations, on why she cannot interfere with this process. There's going to be a large portion of the decision, in my opinion, that will say, we hear you, we understand your concerns, we've listened to them, we've researched them. However, at the end of the day, it's premature to intervene with this process because there are separate stages in the future where First Nations and other stakeholders sit down at the table for the negotiations. And that's laid out by the Clarity Act and the Supreme Court decision on how secession can work in Canada. So there'll be times later, but you need a successful referendum before you even reach those stages. So it's a little bit premature to try and stop a referendum at this stage. And I think that's what the judge will eventually put into her decision and lift the stay and allow Elections Alberta to continue with the process as defined by the Clarity Act.
So it's not necessarily bad news. It's just
It could have been
news
worse.
that the But the judge is looking into it, which the thing that you don't want is a very fast decision, because that
Yeah.
is normally very problematic. Now the judge might be looking for excuses to allow it or disallow it. That we don't know. But it's not. I see how you're seeing this as potential good news, or at least not as bad news.
Yeah, because it's going to be difficult for a King's Bench level judge to override the decision of the Supreme Court. The Supreme Court made it clear that a referendum is allowed on this particular conversation, this subject matter. And the uncertainty is after a successful referendum. How exactly does this work? Who exactly participates? What will happen then? That's where a lot of the uncertainty in this process is, because it's never been tested in Canada. But the Supreme Court made it very clear that this is a democratic process that is available to provinces. So I would find it very difficult for the judge to find a way to circumvent or supersede the Supreme Court's decision, because that will not hold up on appeal. That would just be the simple error in law argument on an appeal. Supreme Court has already decided this. But for her to be sensitive to the applicant and to provide a good decision that will kind of temper down the frustration would be to explain to them that you've been heard, we understand, but here's where you should come back and go ahead and voice your opposition. First will be on the referendum vote itself. Go ahead and vote no. And if it is successful, there will be the required negotiation period that happens through the Clarity Act. And if that's successful, there's going to be a constitution convention in Alberta to hammer out the next stage. And of course, unilaterally, Albertans cannot remove the treaties or end the treaties. That would have to be negotiated and accepted by First Nations people, which I would encourage them to consider looking at a new deal that didn't hold them back and wasn't a deterrent for them to be prosperous. But that will be their decision at the right time, at the right place.
Do you think it's possible that the whole point of this judge is to delay the whole process, to keep pushing it back and pushing it back and pushing it back until it might be too late? Because that's one of the things we were talking about earlier on your show is, as much as I understand why Alberta wants to separate, as much as I condone you guys for separating, I fully understand and I agree. And, you know, if it happens, it sucks for Canada. Like, selfishly, I would much rather, I know that Canada's better with Alberta in it than not, but I understand why you guys want to leave and I fully support it. But at the same time, we see what's going on in Ottawa right now. So probably today we're going to have an announcement, early tomorrow, worst case scenario, that the Liberal government is a majority government. Their floor crossings and backdoor deals have actually paid off, and they have the majority that they did not get elected for. So is it possible that they will do everything in their power to delay it to a point where it's not even possible for you guys to leave? Because that's a question I keep on asking myself. What happens if the Alberta independence does not happen?
Okay, so those are fantastic questions. And I will say loud and clear, they're going to do everything they can to stop, delay, or even completely derail the entire process, for sure. That's a guarantee. What that looks like, I'm not sure. But I'm sure it's not going to be pleasant. Hit pieces, they're going to go after certain leaders. They're going to try and remove credibility. And those are kind of the low-hanging fruit, frankly. And then on a legal level, now that there's a majority coming, could they revoke the Clarity Act entirely? Could they, because that is technically something they can do. Could they go ahead and pass legislation that says you can't do this process? I'm sure Quebec would argue against it, but there's a majority Liberal government now, so that would be, kind of moot for the Bloc to even argue. But getting back to whether or not I think that this particular judge is delaying, there's two things, in my opinion, that judges worry about. One is being appealed, because it's basically saying everything you did was wrong and we're going to reverse your decision. And it's basically a way of slapping a judge in the hand for doing a bad job. So they do worry about appeals. This is why they sometimes come out with a decision which gives both sides a little bit of something, but not anything to really appeal on. This is where I see she might be going. And the second thing is their career. So she would be thinking about, well, what would her path to the Supreme Court look like if she tries to ignore the Supreme Court decision or work against in some way the Supreme Court? She may be thinking about her path to the Supreme Court one day, because she is a federally appointed judge out here in Alberta, and one day she could be appointed to the Supreme Court. So these are the two things that kind of keep judges up at night when you're thinking about them as honest judges. Now, if they're dishonest judges or doing some sort of ideology, I don't want to really jump down that path with this one, because that would be complete speculation on my part. But I have seen judges try to navigate their decision where it becomes non-appealable. It's factual, it's based on law, so there's no error in law, there's no error in fact. Everybody might be a little bit upset. But what I do think is a good sign is there wasn't a quick decision. Either way, if she came back and said, look, I'm going to allow it completely, here's my 10-minute response, I think the other side would have been pretty frustrated and appealed right away. Or if it went the other way, well, I'm going to block it completely. Well, even the government of Alberta would have appealed it, because they were arguing that this was premature. So I think what we see here is a stay. And I just want to remind your viewers and my viewers, the Supreme Court gave a stay to the ostrich farm on the call, but in the end, the call still happened. So a stay just means a pause on things right now. Well, we think about this a little bit more, and then we're either going to lift the stay, which means continue as you were, or provide a judgment or an injunction, which will lay out what the court says can happen at that stage. But I saw it pretty quickly as probably good news. The signatures can't continue. There's no interruption in that process right now. It's just we're not going to get the official count likely as quickly as we would have under normal circumstances, but I don't think that's going to be enough to delay it past the October 19th referendum date that Danielle Smith has announced that this question will be on if it gets through to the necessary signatures and validation stages.
For the people listening out there, if it's your first time on the show, I want to encourage you to ask questions, to ask comment, because the new format of this show is to spend half of the show answering comments and taking questions from the audience. So if you have comments, you have questions for Jason, particularly considering what we're talking about, please go to the comment section and ask your questions. I will highlight the ones that I believe needs to be addressed, and we will take it from there. But the whole point is to be able to give you guys a voice, to be able to, for you to ask Jason what question you want to ask him. So just make sure to drop them in the comment below. So if we go back to what you were just saying, because a stay means a pause. Let's be honest. This is all it means. It means a delay. How long, we don't know. The longer it is, the longer you guys stay in Canada, which you're facing two problems, right? Either this doesn't go through and you're still stuck in Canada, or this stay continues and you guys are still stuck in Canada until the decision is made. But the problem still remains the same, that we have a common enemy, you and I, as someone that wants Canada to be saved, and as you that believes that the best path forward is for Alberta to separate, we still have a common enemy. The whole independence movement and the movement I'm trying to create, same enemy, the Uniparty in Ottawa. We have a politician problem. No matter how you look at it, if it's an Alberta thing or it's a federal thing, we're looking at a problem that is our politician. How do you think we can move forward from this? Because even if you guys do separate, your battle is not over. You're still stuck with a lot of politicians that wanted to stay in Canada. Daniel Smith. And you're gonna be faced with some major issues internally. It's just the battle is just beginning for you guys, even if the independence becomes a reality. So how do you think we address the people that are in power that might not have the common good as their main objective?
I'm going to kind of take a different angle on this one as someone who ran for office as an MP in the last federal election. There is no way to replace the politicians. The system's working exactly as it's designed. And that means the party gatekeepers do what they do. They sit and negotiate. I think this is why you're seeing so many floor crossers, because it's really not a big change in their ideology at all for them to do that. And what I mean by that is, I don't believe when they come and take the microphone and say anything, they actually believe that. And that's both sides. So this is why you can have a conservative that seems to be very right leaning, and then the very next day she crosses the floor and now she's completely changed her ideology. That I don't think indicates that she actually had deep rooted beliefs or principles ever. Okay, so I believe when she's taking a microphone as a conservative, she's saying the conservative stuff in order to get those votes. And this is why it's so easy for them to cross the floor and then say the liberal stuff when they're over there as well. They will toe the party line. I believe our uniparty two-party system is by design. This is why it's difficult for NDP, Green, PPC, or any third party to really gain some support in this system. So it's working exactly how it's supposed to on the federal level. And then when you look on the provincial level, like a Danielle Smith, well, we had Jason Kenney, and the party wasn't pleased with him. A couple elections internal, and he's been replaced. So there is a way to replace politicians on a provincial level, but then you're still stuck in the federal system. So no matter how good of a person you put up, and even if you think Danielle Smith is the best premier in Canada, she can't move the needle by herself. She needs the support of multiple good premiers. And I don't think the system provides that opportunity at all. These are some of the arguments why independence feels like the right thing to do, because you can rebuild it into a republic instead of a democratic monarchy, constitutional monarchy, which is the current system we're under, which has given us exactly what we have. So sadly, Nico, because I've been in the system trying, I don't think you can replace the politicians. They'll just replace it with another yes person that will go to the microphone and say the conservative or liberal things in order to gain the support. But you'll never truly know what they want or say. And I think it's designed that way. That's why you don't have independent people like me or you being asked to run or given the opportunity to run for one of the major parties, because we will not be allowed to get close to those levers of power. That we're not the right type of mindsets. We're far too independent and far too honest of fighting for our neighbors. That's not how the system was designed, so we don't belong in it. Sadly, I don't think there's a way to change it.
So you don't think we can change the system? Do you think that voting actually matters? Because this is a question every Canadian out there should be asking themselves, no matter if they're Albertans that want separation or independence, or if you're just a Canadian that will stay part of Canada. Does voting matter if floor crossing is so easy? Because the people out there that believe they're lying to themselves thinking that Canadians vote for the individual need to look at the facts here. Most people that voted in the last election have no idea who their MP actually is. They don't know. They don't know who they voted for. They voted for the color blue. They voted for the color red or orange or green, whatever they voted for. But we vote for the party. We don't vote for the individual. And if floor crossings are so easy, do we really have a choice? Meaning, does our vote actually matter?
No, sadly, they do not. I'm definitely, after that last election, I've learned that lesson, maybe the hard way. It's very similar to when you have children and you got a young one too, so you're going to fully understand this. And you say, hey, I want you to go to bed. And they say no. And then you say, okay, well, here are your options. You can turn on the TV for 30 minutes, or you can go to bed without TV. And then in their mind, they were given the choice. And then they get to pick one. And now they feel like it was their decision on how they go to bed. But at the end of the day, they're going to bed, even though that's not what they originally wanted. This is no different. They give you the choice of a couple parties. You feel like, oh, this one says more of the things I like, so I'm going to go ahead and vote for it. But the one thing that they all say frequently is your voice only matters at election time. It doesn't matter any other time. So that means right after the election, they can just stop doing what they were doing and do something else, or not follow through with what they say. In fact, we treat that as a cultural joke. Politicians lie to both sides of their mouths, and we all seem to be accepting that. So no, I really don't think at this stage voting in its traditional sense, meaning your voice is being heard, happens anymore. Not in Canada.
So your idea behind Alberta independence is to completely change the system into not a democracy basically
Mm.
anymore. you want to have a republic, but the same problem could still be true, that your voting doesn't matter. Because right now we're talking voting as in, if you vote for someone that can switch party anytime they want, our vote doesn't matter. But you're still voting for politicians. But by doing it, do you think that because it's a smaller province, it's a smaller piece of land, it is easier to control? Because I'm trying to understand here, if voting doesn't really matter, what is the point of collecting signatures if we don't trust the results?
Well, there's, I think, two questions there. There's the does a referendum have weight, and will that get us out question? So why vote for a referendum? I
Mm-hmm.
still think at this stage it hasn't been proven to me that it doesn't. That hasn't been tested on the federal level at all. No province had a successful referendum under Canadian history, so we really don't know what's going to happen there. I know they're going to put up all the challenges that they can, but if it turns out that, yes, a strong, successful referendum can lead to secession after negotiation, well, then we'll find that out. The other one that you have is, can you rebuild the system so that you don't run into the same thing? And that's where a republic, ideally, with a lot more checks and balances in place, like recall and term limits, will actually force the system to be a little bit more accountable to the people directly. There's ideas like don't allow parties, just be representation like you do on a municipal level. You vote the local guy and gal in, then sometimes you vote your mayor or reeve, or it's selected amongst the ones that have vote. Like each region kind of has their own rules on that, but you can have recall. Um, but if there's a lot more direct democracy tools by using systems that we've seen around the world and historically that were a little bit more in line with representation versus rule by mob and rule by elite, then we could take a step closer to that. Because the only other option, Nico, is non-peaceful options. And I certainly want to
Mm.
live in a place where it's peaceful, transition to another government, peaceful representation. We have a way to have our voice through referendums and other types of mechanisms like recall, elected judges, elected police chiefs or sheriffs, elected senators instead of appointed. If we can make some of these fundamental changes, I think we take at least one step closer to true representation. And I don't think any system is going to be perfect. But democracy is ruled by mob. And when you have an elite system, then it becomes a rule by elite. When the courts make all the laws and not the people, you have a rule by the elite. So I'd like to see both of those kind of come to an end. And I think there are some reasonable, tangible solutions on the table to make Alberta very different and maybe be a template for other provinces and other places around the West that want to see a Christian-based or with God at the center in the foundation of any new constitution or republic. I think we've also lost our way on that topic as well.
It definitely makes for interesting times. I don't know what other words to use than interesting, because no matter where you look, it's problematic. It doesn't matter that you're looking at the federal level, you're looking at the provincial level, you're looking at the politicians themselves, you're looking at the parties. I don't know that there's a lot of Canadians out there that have faith, and that applies to both Albertans and Canadians, because that's something I see every day. I speak a lot about the problems, and now I really want to focus on solutions, because I'm tired of seeing it's too late for Canada. I'm tired of seeing that Canada's done. And that's a very strong message in the Albertan movement. And I'm not disagreeing that it's problematic. There's no questions about that. We definitely have to figure out what's going on, because it's only going to get worse. It's not going to get
Mhm.
better by itself. I still have faith that we can do something about it. But I want to hear from the commenters out there, because we're halfway through. We're going to start taking your comments. We're going to start taking your questions. But I want you guys to not only have questions for Jason, but I'd like you guys to also address, what do you think can be done for both Canada and Alberta? Because as far as I'm concerned right now, Alberta is still part of Canada. So the question remains the same. What do you guys think should be done to kind of fix the problems that we're seeing today? And we're talking a lot about politicians not doing the right thing for Canadians. They definitely don't work for us. So they either work for themselves or they work for people behind the scenes that we all know who they are. But they definitely don't work for Canadians. So I wonder, for the people watching, for the people commenting, let us know. What do you guys think? What can we do as Canadians slash Albertans in order to change the reality in which we live? Drop that in the comment section, and I'm going to start uh, highlighting them. I'm going to start talking about them because I highlighted a bunch of them, so it's going to be interesting. But before we do, I want to speak. There's a message in there for you, by the way. I got somebody that wanted me to leave you a message today, so I will do that in just a second, Jason. But I want to speak about this. I told myself I would bring it up on the screen, so here we go. We are trying to get you guys on the show, and by you guys, I mean the commenters, I mean the listeners, I mean the people that are here day in and day out. My goal, the next step for this show is to bring you guys on. It's all about your participation. It's all about taking this to the next level. And I don't want just comments. I want real call-ins, just like they do on AM talk radio. That's what I want. That's one of my dreams, to have an AM radio show eventually. But this is what I want to turn this show into. And I want to give you guys the opportunity to do it without special equipment. No need for microphones, no need for cameras, just your cell phone. And this idea didn't even come from me. This idea came from Prairie, our moderator. She asked me the other day, why don't you drop a link in the chat so that we can come on and talk? Because that is the quality of commenters that we have on this show. And I found a solution. She asked me on Friday. On Saturday, I have a solution. And you see the solution right on your screen right now. We need your help in order to make this happen. And this is the type of equipment that we need. It is the Rodecaster Pro 2. And it just so turns out that it's on sale right now. It's on sale until the end of the month. It normally goes for $9.89. It is on sale for $8.19. So I ask you, the people out there, if you are interested in coming on the show and calling in, actually having your voice heard, not just listening, but shaping the show, I encourage you to go to thepoliticalorphans.com/hotline, and you can see all the details. And it's already started. We had our first donation yesterday, and that is a comment that goes for you. So I want to thank, first and foremost, Don Vaillant, as we would say it in French, but I do not know if he's a French guy. But he gave us a donation of $100 yesterday to go towards that piece of equipment right there that would allow to set up the Orphans hotline. And he said the following: Nico, such a great idea. That's for you, brother. Tell Jason Lavigne he needs this for the tea and coffee, as that podcast is my commute show in Alberta, and making it a call-in show would be excellent. So I haven't even set it up on my show that people want to copy me. So I'm just saying, I'm just relaying the message from Don. But Don, thank you for the donation. I invite everybody out there, if you want to turn this show into a call-in show, where not only do we have comments, we have call-ins, and eventually we might have some people joining us from the audience directly so that we can see them and talk to them. So if you're interested, thepoliticalorphans/hotline. Until then, we take questions. So Jason, you ready? You ready
let
to
me
take some of the
answer
comments?
Don's question.
Absolutely, go for it.
I know Don. He's a fantastic guy. We see him at a lot of our events, and he's also one of the people that are behind supporting our efforts to do the Sean Hartman documentary. So Don, I love you. You know that. We actually bought the equipment very similar to what you're looking at there to do exactly that. And we do have the VoIP and the technology to do that. So Don, I'm going to take that to heart. There may be in the near future, Don, as you know, Paula will be busy Monday mornings. And we were thinking about stopping the show and only doing Tuesday to Friday, but maybe we'll turn Mondays into a call-in show so that I have somebody to talk to when we're doing that. So I'll look at that. I have the tech already specifically for that purpose. We have the VoIP phone number for that purpose. And yeah, maybe we'll do exactly that. Thanks for the incentive there, Don.
Sounds like a good dude to me. We're going to start comments. We have to start with Stu. Stu, thank you for the tip, as always. I don't believe Canada can survive economically at the same level without Alberta.
Stu, I think you're wise to spend your Canadian funds now with that $5 tip, because that's not going to be worth as much later if Alberta is successful. I believe he's correct. The economic engine, at least when it comes to trade and resource value, is Alberta. And this is kind of part of the argument of why Alberta can stand on its own 2 feet, is it does have that economic resources and the riches provided by law in 1930. So this is Alberta's oil, Alberta's resources. The same law gave BC the same rights too. That's why it's Alberta's, or it's BC's lumber and natural gas. But Stu, you're correct. And this could be why we're going to see there's several reasons why we're going to see pretty hard resistance on every single level to stop Alberta. But the first one's going to be through information warfare, where they're going to come at and misinform and scare the pensioners and scare Albertans and scare businesses and stuff like that to vote against it. But if we're successful after that level, I expect it to be very difficult to do. But yes, it's going to be hard on Canada as a whole when it comes to losing Alberta. We understand that.
Do you think, because I'm just looking for the comment about it, because somebody was talking about Iran. Do you think that there is a situation where what's going on in Iran, considering that 20% of the oil and gas is emanating from the Middle East, that's being blocked in the what was it, the hummus pass, the hummus pass, I love hummus, the
Hormuz Strait.
Yeah, exactly. Do you think that that will put a damper on Alberta independence, considering that the cost of, at least near me in Montreal, the gas was above just over $2. I think I heard 220, 230 in BC. Do you think that that's going to cause a lot of animosity towards Alberta, or the rest of Canada starting to say that Alberta's oil is Canadian oil?
Ironically, I think actually the opposite can happen, because if Alberta is independent, they can lower the value or the price of that. Canada has locked Canada into a lot of international laws to set the price. Alberta has enough oil where we can probably kind of just start things off on our own and renegotiate a global price, and then also provide that to Canada. We can become a very cheap option for Canada when it comes to energy, if Alberta's in charge of going ahead and working on the global scale on our own. That's the pricing side. Also on the volume side, if Alberta has a lot of these restrictions, does a bunch of pipelines go to the south with 4 or 5 million more barrels a day, that's going to provide a lot more oil and energy to the global markets. And I guarantee you, Alberta will happily go east, west, and north with pipelines if Canada is looking to get some of this as well at a very reduced price, because there's no transportation cost. There's some pipeline cost, but there's no crossing an ocean with it. So I actually, ironically, think that an independent Alberta will be able to lower the energy cost to all our neighbors and part of the global market as well. So when you have things like 20% of the oil being stopped in one part of the world, whether it's through the Middle East or other parts, Alberta can pick up that slack, especially if we can go ahead and get started now on some major projects and get some of those pipes laid. And we'd love to go north, east, south, and west with this energy. This is kind of our hope as soon as we become independent to get started on that right away. It'd be great if Canada did that. It's kind of silly when you hear Canadians complaining about the high gas prices, but yet we have the third largest oil reserve in the world, and we're not tapping it because of regulations and decisions made in Ottawa. So it's a self-inflicted wound on Canada's part. If Alberta was able to develop their own resources, I assure you, our goal would be to enter the market and be very competitive, cost competitive. And we have very low transportation costs. So Canada would probably benefit tremendously. Maybe a pipeline just over to Saskatchewan, who knows, or over to BC might be enough. But I would encourage Canadians to go ahead and negotiate with an independent Alberta when it comes to energy.
Here's a comment that I'm only going to take because it's something that I've seen many times before. and I want to give you the chance to address it. It is not obviously a comment I agree with, but SRCX is saying Alberta separatists are right-wing Christian nationalists, white supremacists, period. Like, I have heard this comment many times, and people say it like it's a fact. What do you say to people like SRCX that is clearly against Alberta separatists? What do you say? What do you say
We'll
to
leave
him?
that comment up for a bit. Well, first of all, it's a pretty common one that we hear a lot. I think this comment itself is racist because obviously you don't know the people involved. We have a vast range of races and cultures involved in this. The Christian part, why are you bringing faith into this? That's not necessary. Nationalist, well, it sounds like he's one as well because he's a Canadian nationalist. He wants to keep Canada together as a nation, and that's all that means. It means you believe in your nation. So I have no problem with the nationalist thing. I have no problem with being called Christian. I wear that with a lot of pride. My faith is important to me. But to bring race in with white supremacists, that's just to do everything that the leftist Marxist people will do, and that will to call you name. But we've been called this for every single topic for so long. I'm surprised he didn't put redneck, ditchweed in there and all that stuff too, because we get that as well. But this is clearly a person who's racist, because if you actually come to these meetings, this is not a true statement at all. But it doesn't bother us anymore. We've been called much worse by better people.
Well said. It's only, that's exactly what it looks to me. Every single time you can't argue, you insult. When you can't
But it's not an
debate,
insult to us anymore. Like,
you
it doesn't
insult.
inflict any wounds.
Well, let me rephrase that. Every time you can't argue or debate, you try to
Mhm.
insult, because that's always the last resort. But I just don't understand what separatism has to do with being a white Christian. It really looks like we have become the scapegoat for everything. Everything that goes wrong is our fault. Yet, what are the races that we see in this movement? It's like saying that the Quebec separatist movement is all white Christians. Sorry, bruh. There's not a lot of Christians where I'm from. And not a lot of Christian left in Quebec. I can tell you that much. So what's the excuse for Quebec wanting to separate? And there's this is something that you and I have spoken about before, how Quebec has tried, how it seems that Quebec is treated differently. Not it seems, let me rephrase that. How Quebec is treated differently than any other province. And there was a comment here that I'd like for you to address. What do you think about hold on, let me pull up the name. John Fucker, PR. I love your name, P7R. Love that word, love your name. What do you think about the same time Quebec getting away with everything that they accuse us of?
I'm not sure if I understand that question completely. Unless us is the maybe this is an Albertan, and they're kind of feeling that same type of rhetoric that's being thrown at Albertans only, but not towards Quebecers. And this is kind of why I wanted to kind of leave that message up for a little bit longer, because I said earlier, one of the things that we're not seeing happen is reasons to stay in Canada. And then when you have people that make that kind of rhetoric, you're just making it easier for us to go ahead and make that separation. That would be no different than negotiating or contemplating a divorce, and you're bringing it to your spouse, and then they tell you how stupid and ugly and horrible you are. Well, you're not making it any easier to stay. So you're actually making it easier to leave. So too bad these people don't realize that, or maybe they don't care. But they're not moving the needle in the direction that they think they are. They're actually moving it in the other direction, because you're making it easier to say goodbye to people like that. But to John, we saw that with the Quebec separation in 1980 and 95. Canada was doing the "I love you, Quebec" messaging. Please don't leave, which would have been a lot more appropriate, especially if you're talking to Alberta, that seems to have a lot of the things you want. But we're not seeing that. And here's the reason why I think that's happening, John, because this is how Canadians in that neck of the woods have always felt about Albertans. You're seeing them come out and just really expressing how they always felt. And this is what a lot of Albertans have been saying for 45 plus years. We're getting no respect, right? Like we've never been getting respect. And now you're just seeing it amplified. But when it comes to Quebec, it was a cultural thing, not an economic thing. So they were able to placate more to emotion. But when it comes to when we make the arguments, $20 to $30 billion a year leaves Alberta with no services or return on it, it's hard for them to say, no, that's not true. Well, that comes out of Stats Canada and the federal government itself. It's very true. So it's no longer an emotional conversation. It's a financial, economic conversation. They can't argue those points. So they just frankly just get mad. So that's why I see there's a difference. Quebec, it was cultural. And you can, try and talk to the emotion of Quebecers by saying we love you. But with Alberta, they've always been this way to Albertans. You're just seeing it surface loud and clear now. And it doesn't bother me any. Every time we see one of those, anybody who's a moderate middle thinking about, well, where do I want to go? Do I want to be part of Canada that calls people white nationalist, racist, supremacists, or do I want to work on a future for my children? You're actually helping us. So keep going. So, John, if you are Albertan, I think you probably understand this as much as anybody else. They've always been this way towards us. They're just very vocal about it now.
Yeah, and I agree with you. The way you explained the Quebec separation is exactly how it was. I was here during those years. I was young, but it is a cultural thing. You guys, it's an economic separation, so it doesn't appeal to the heart as much. It's harder to make the logical appeal matter to people that are driven by emotion, which is most
Yeah.
Canadians today. So I fully understand, but at the same time, if I back on to the comment and your response, it is a possibility that in Quebec this year a separatist government will be elected. And earlier I said that if Alberta separates, a conservative party will never rule again.
Yeah.
But if Quebec separates, a liberal government will have problems getting elected because Quebec will no longer be there. And those are the facts. If you look at the numbers, that's what the numbers are indicating. So do you think that Quebec and Alberta should be making deals behind the scene to support each other towards a separate dream, an independent dream?
Those conversations have happened. Those meetings have already happened. So it's not something that I think should happen. It's already happened. The Parti Québécois leader has been out to Alberta in English, came here to have a conversation about exactly what happens on October 20th. And the same thing for them. They don't want to see Alberta drop the ball. They don't want to see Alberta, make a big mess of things. They want to see Alberta take a calm, rational, logical, stoic approach to getting this done because Quebec's likely right behind us on the same thing. So those conversations have happened. If Quebec chooses to vote in a provincial party whose main purpose is to bring the referendum to the people for secession, and they know that, that's already started happening. Those conversations have happened. So I think both, and they both said they will recognize each other, because if things get a little bit difficult with Ottawa, recognition by others as a sovereign state is part of the process. If you're going to go the international route, you have to be able to afford it, you have to be able to support it, and then you have to have support from other nations to become it. Those are the three major check marks, and Alberta can certainly afford it. The people, if they support it, will have that one done. And then other nations, including an independent Quebec, the US, and some other nations out there, have already declared that they would support it internationally. So, yes, that conversation's already happened a few times.
What do you say to comments like Mob's comment where what about the infrastructure federally? So the infrastructure that belongs to Canada, basically that wouldn't belong to you guys, at least. I would be curious to see how that would be separated. But what do you say to the infrastructure that does belong to Canada right now? How would that be dealt with in a Alberta, in an independent Alberta? Because that's a fair question.
No, it is. And some of the first ones that come to mind is like EI and CPP and the military and federal police, RCMP, CSIS, and all of those things. Alberta has been contributing more than its fair share to the federal system and not returning all of the services back. It's somewhere around the $60 billion goes to Ottawa and about $30 billion comes back in services like CPP and old age security, military, border, international trade. But the other 20 to 30 doesn't come back. So if you're asking whether or not Alberta can afford to participate on federal programs and federal infrastructure and support, we already are. In fact, we're subsidizing other provinces for them to get it as well. If you want to talk about the practical terms, like, well, are you going to have a military? Well, that's what the Clarity Act and the Supreme Court laid out, is you sit down and negotiate the separation. So if you're having a divorce, who gets the house, who gets the car, who has to take the kids to school, there's going to be a lot of conversations there. But it'll be quite simply, there'll be either a purchase or an offset of money that's owed to Alberta, like CPP, somewhere around, I think $340 billion is owed to Alberta. That's going to buy you a lot of military bases, national parks. And actually, I want to talk about national parks for a second. Canada doesn't own the national parks. Alberta does. Canada administers them, which just means they run the buildings and they run the programs, but they actually don't own the land. The land is owned by all provinces. They own their own land. So it's just an administration level. Of course, Alberta can turn the federal parks into the nation of Alberta parks. That's not a problem. There's Alberta parks already, so we have provincial parks already. It'd just be expanded to be administrative of the rest of them as well. And a lot of Albertans say that that's going to be a good thing. When it comes to forest management, we have wildfires out here. We have forest issues. We think we can do a better job on that anyways. But when it comes to military, we actually, you have that argument that we're landlocked. That might be one of your comments. What do you do when you're landlocked? Well, landlocked actually works both ways. If there was a foreign invasion from somewhere, let's say China, they'd have to get through US or Canada physically before they got to Alberta. So landlocked actually creates a buffer when it comes to protecting ourselves. And we would be focused on our borders a lot more than we are now in order to protecting our borders. So we'd actually kind of have two layers when it comes to national security. We got the buffer of other countries, large countries, and then we have our own internal security. So I think there's a lot of transition that will have to happen. Some of these programs would have to be moved to Alberta. Some of them are already part of Alberta. Just the administration has to be done. And other ones would require Albertans to stand up and join the Alberta military and then reoccupy the Canadian Forces bases, which will now be Alberta Forces bases after the negotiation with Ottawa is done. I don't think the day-to-day would change a lot. You would just see less Canadian flags around. But when it comes to the services being offered on a federal level, Alberta already pays its fair share and then some to provide those services. So I'm pretty sure we can hammer out those details.
Here's a good question by Trevor. 90% of Alberta's problems are provincial. So let me rephrase that. It's not a question, it's a comment, but I'm curious for you to address it. What do you say to people like Trevor that believes that 90% of Alberta's problems are provincial and not federal?
Well, he's just pulled that number out of nowhere. I absolutely don't think that number is fair. Provincially, we have an $8 billion deficit. We wouldn't have that if we were not sending $20 to $30 billion outside of Alberta. I certainly think that we're not a perfect province, a perfect government, but when it comes down to fiscal responsibility, Alberta is one of the top performers. And when it comes to being able to do our own thing, for example, when it comes to gender ideology, Alberta's cracking down on it. When it comes to taking back to schools and parental rights, Alberta's cracking down on it. When it comes to gun and the rights for property, Alberta's working on that. Castle law, protecting yourself, self-defense. Alberta's doing a lot of good things too. But what he's kind of highlighting here is at least, in his word, 10% of our problems federal. Well, let's drop that and then let's work on the rest of it. If we don't have to negotiate with Ottawa to get things done, like infrastructure for pipelines, entering global markets like Asia for energy, I think that we'll be able to do a far better job. But I agree with him on we have some problems, but when it comes to the nation, we have one of the better performing provinces. More people are moving here than any other nation. And yes, we do have a deficit, so we have some spending problems, but that could be offset pretty quick when it comes to sovereign fund, we can start investing in ourselves a lot more, and we can tackle some of these issues, Trevor, when it comes to representation, because that would be the provincial government, the federal government, and possibly even the municipal government would be redefined under a new constitution in Alberta.
Well said. I know Trevor, if I'm not mistaken, is from Alberta, but he does not want to separate. He wants to stay.
I've crossed paths with him a few times. He has very wise questions, but he also has some very pointed opinions. So I respect him. So I'm glad he provided a question or two.
Which I appreciate. I will always appreciate comments that are not easy to answer. And that goes to the people out there. If you want your comments to be read, ask serious questions. The whole point of this is not to have easy conversation. We don't fix anything by having easy conversation. I want those hard questions. And the guests from now on, starting today, Jason, you were the first one with that new format where our guests are going to stay for an hour, not just half an hour like we've been doing. They're going to stay for the whole show. And the second part of the show is for questions. I'm not there. I choose the questions that I want to get answers to, that I know will generate a great conversation, because that's the whole point. And those are the guests that are going to be on the show. If I'm not going to invite guests that can't handle questions. If you can't handle it, you're not made for this show. It's really that simple. So I invite the people out there, if you're asking questions, ask good questions. Ask questions that will be hard to answer, because that is the point. We need to have those conversations. We need to be able to have the hard conversations that will lead to the hard conversation, the hard questions that will lead to the hard conversations that will potentially lead to solutions. Because complaining is one thing, but we need to find solutions. Two things before I let you guys go, before I stop the show. First, I want to say thank you. There's somebody that's anonymous that just donated $50 for the buy of the Rodecaster to be able to take this show to the next level and actually take call-ins for you guys to be heard with no fancy equipment, just a cell phone. So somebody just provided $50. They did not leave their name. I will respect that. So thank you, but I know it came from here because it's just after I was talking about it. So thank you very much, whoever that person is. Second thing I wanted to bring up, we have a moderator that is Prairie. First time we've had a moderator. I normally handle all the comments. I normally handle everything at once. But I wanted to put the invitation out there. If you've been with us for a while, if you're always on the show and you're interested in moderating, helping me maybe highlight some comments, maybe drop some links like Prairie is doing, send me your request, send me your name. You can reach me at info@thepoliticalorphans.com. So info@thepoliticalorphans.com, and tell me that you want to do this. I would love to have a few moderators. It makes my job a lot easier. Absolutely a lot easier if I don't have to manage everything with the comments. That being said, guys, I want to thank every single one of you for being here. I want to thank you for the comments. Jason, obviously, thank you for having me on once again on your show this morning. Thank you for being here today. And it seems that we might have something coming up where we are going to see a bit more of each other. So stay tuned for that. But thank you for being here. And I want to remind people out there, our politicians are the problem. A new generation of leaders is the solution. We do it one community at a time. Time to stop complaining, start leading. If that talks to you, join us. Become a member. Go to thepoliticalorphans.com. Join us, as I said. And thank you for all of you. Make sure to like, make sure to comment, make sure to subscribe. And make sure to join us tomorrow, 7 p.m. Eastern Time. Until then, enjoy the rest of your night and peace.
God bless.